phenomenon of church behavior. Now, I guess it's not really new. I guess I wasn't just familiar with its existence. Um, First of all, let me explain this video will be about two different things. I am volunteering, kind of helping with a indirect church organization, like connection to help for someone else, which essentially means you kind of volunteer to help do something, and usually the people that you are helping end up being like sick or something. And the only reason why I'm going to say this is because this is the same cycle I've experienced over and over again. Before this entire trafficking by odd community in cities began, I was volunteering with the church. It was like 3 of us volunteering. It was me and 2 other white girls, and then the white girls just kind of popped off and disappeared, and I was left doing somebody's job, and there was no one else to do it, and so it left me with a responsibility that wasn't supposed to be a responsibility. It essentially became like a job. Well, because I was with Caucasians of lower income class, and the majority of that church was for like cleaning people. Like the whole church was like cleaning people. Like literally, they were like cleaning people, CNAs, at-home moms, retired. That was about it. There were very few employed, employable, and actually employed people. They were marrying off their young men that had never had real jobs. They weren't getting degrees. They were just kind of existing until they would get women that had money, and then they would get their men from that congregation to marry those girls. And so that's how they generated money. They would find women from, a higher income, maybe middle class, lower middle class, whatever, above their class. They would bring them in and swoon and do love bombing, and then get them to marry one of their males. And the majority of their males were like farmers' kids. Some of them were farmers and stuff like that, but they weren't really employed. I didn't think that mattered, but with white people and how they partition themselves off, the mind of an undereducated and probably a person that has a background of poverty, they are very bad about partitioning their mind. I'm not sure why, because that's not, I had my own problems as a child. But what I did and what I learned very early on was it was very important to get balance so that I could know what normal was, even though I wasn't always around normal. And so that I could be really good about balancing what the reality of my situation was so that I could move forward. Because I found, even as a child, people will just be stuck in something they're stuck in psychologically and not allow you to make progress. So for even maturation, for even your mind to become mature, you need to develop. So as a child, I went and I eventually, I called the psychologist myself, and I said, I'm having problems at home. I don't understand my mom and dad sometimes. They're having issues. They would ask me about their marriage, and I was a child, and so they would use me as a sounding board to say what they wouldn't say to one another, or they might have asked me about their marriage. And so I didn't take it lightly, because I thought, well, they're asking me because we are a praying family, and so I'm going to take that responsibility and say, okay, well, what would I do? And I would always ask, well, I want you both to be happy. What do you do to be happy? What can you do to be happy? And that was about literally my therapy for my parents, was talking to me sometimes, whatever. And later on in my life, that would happen again, until I came across this white horse and these other really slave type people that had slavery in their system. And there's slavery in my mom's system, my aunt's system, and I'll slowly, they'll begin to show it to you, and literally it's a spirit, because what has happened in this partitioning of the mind, and whoever is taking authority, these people, I told you before, South Bend is, for me, coming from where I was coming from in West Lafayette, the job and everything, and school and everything, their existence was kind of like what I would describe a plantation would be run like. And so you couldn't go to certain sides of town without like having some kind of like reason. Like you couldn't go to certain gas stations. It was very odd. They were very antisocial. They were very combative, and you find that with people that have been abused. And so you also find that with those kinds of communities that where the authority has been abusive or needs have not been met, and so people will territorialize. And like if you read about dictatorship, what dictatorship will do with a community or organization is it'll make everybody stratify, and then it'll make you fight for basic needs, and then it'll make you fight each other for basic needs. And because the dictator has taken the balance of security away from the people, they'll find it in themselves, they'll find it within themselves, they'll find it within their group, and then they'll distribute that, and then it'll move geographically. And so with narcissists, if you have cult leaders, they have geographical realms that they'll use. They have certain churches in certain cities or certain states that pastor will visit to go get more narcissistic supply. So maybe, you know, the other 5 churches in the community don't like that one church, but there are 3 churches that they know that they can go to without a problem. That's similar to with a narcissistic supply. If you are an adult and you have a problem with someone and you're under God, if you have normal brain activity, then it doesn't matter what church you go to. It matters that you are, you know, under this God that you speak about. But when you get more mature, when your mind is degraded and you don't have the maturity to really think about what you're saying or think about what you're doing, then when you hear things about God, only your church knows how or who God is. The reality is no cell in anybody and no DNA in anybody's body is the same. And if we were all the same, we would not be able to provide the various needs for the human race. So the AME, CME, whatever, Baptist have you, whatever have you, are all flavors of what we need to survive because we don't all behave the same. Which, you know, that's a whole other story, which is why I ended up at that church, because the baseline for me, using my mind, understanding, okay, the Bible is the basis, and then the Lord and the Holy Trinity are the scaffolding for my belief system, and then how that's displayed to me is my choice, because I know that I'm grounded within this Bible that's going to give me the purity of what I need, and I'll have to take that, and you're supposed to take the Bible and discern for yourself what you do and don't follow. Anyway, so you have people that are so religious that they think if you know anything about the Bible, you can't have a worldly job. That's just not the case. They think that if you do something like volunteering, that what you did for volunteering is the only thing you know how to do. And so what I found in these communities, like, and this is so weird, I was like, what's wrong here? If you do something to help somebody, that's what people think that you do. They don't even read resumes. Well, I couldn't figure out, well, why don't you understand that my resume is who I am and not me volunteering somewhere? They don't read. Some of them cannot read. You might even find illiteracy in a job system, but somebody knows someone, and so they've got this job, and like the analysis will be done by a computer. And so, like, for example, I had a person send me a method of analysis so they could see how effective my resume was. And they sent me a free version, and it had no brain activity, and I say that all the time, meaning there was an analysis of the wording and the words that I used to describe my kind of the offerings that I would provide as an employee. And it had the street name as a part of my analysis. And I said, it didn't even, I mean, you didn't even look to see if it was using the street name from my, from the place that I was sending it from. You know, your analysis is analyzing a street name, which has no relevance to the resume. So that means that your analysis is not as thorough as you would like it to be, and you don't check, or you don't do double data entry, you're not even aware of what data you're collecting. You're just a plug and chug person. Don't do business with plug and chug people, because computers are not perfect. Like Excel, people know Excel is great, but Excel is horrible. Like, you cannot do certain kinds of analysis with Excel because it's faulty. You can only go to so many digits before you have problems with calculations, and then it's just not very precise. So you use it for baseline analysis, but then you use like a higher level statistics model for or SAS or SPSS for other, or Minitab, things like that, that are more specific, that have that are more robust in dealing with numbers. But for the basic person, Excel will do fine. But if you are, for example, a person that's handling resumes, and you don't understand how to read a resume, and then you get a resume of a high-level person, and the only thing that you can be is annoyed because you have to read more, or you're annoyed because they have 10 years of history. Well, if you're from the academic realm, it's good for certain things to be included in your resume, and there's certain things that you should not include on your resume. But you're dealing with people that are unfortunately, undereducated. They're not familiar with the breadth of the field of resumes. The resumes are not just, plug and chug, fill in the blanks, say what you did, and the most important thing is the date. That is a baby's understanding of what a resume is. Dates are important, but if you don't know who you're employing and why, then you'll have scientists that are perfectly qualified to apply for jobs that are within certain fields, and because you don't understand why there's a time gap, or why that's a normal thing within scientists, then you think that there's something wrong with that. And many scientists there are not, but many scientists there are, because you might not have funding. You might have a year where you have, you might have a lab that had like 5 different things that they're going to work on, and at the end your contract ended because you were the kind of scientist that they needed for that medical device. For example, medical device companies, they expand what they do often, and sometimes, like for example, our company, we began with just basic sense, and then we had to go into pharmacology. We didn't go hire a pharmacologist. We would bring in a pharmacologist for a period of time, and so we didn't bring a pharmacologist on board. That pharmacologist was not impertinent or non-important. That pharmacologist was employed for that period of time until another opportunity came. And that's what the sciences look like. But if you're an idiot, you don't know any better. You look at certain resumes and there are holes in them, and all you know is ghetto fabulous, unemployed, white trash, ghetto fabulous resume understanding, and you're immature in it. You're not familiar with the other fields. You just don't like scientists because you think they're too smart. That's when you have the same thing as I talked about, the immaturity in the psychological progress. If you are HR director, if you are over groups of people, like for example, we had a woman that took a position, and I think she took the position because she knew somebody that knew somebody. She didn't know what to do with the position. For like a year and a half, she had a position, but she was never at work. We didn't know whether she was doing something. So what she did eventually was decided to put us on committees, and she would just like ask us questions. Instead of her just saying, I really don't know what to do with this job because it was outside of her field and everything, we went on with a lot of safety issues not being answered, probably illegal things that were held on to and dealt with improperly because she didn't admit that she didn't know what the hell she was doing. And so I know that exists. I know there are people that have jobs and they're not doing anything at work all day. And they just sit there, and I couldn't understand why, and that's the presence of this autistic behavior within these populations. So when you get to go and be employed within them, they also think that their local community colleges are the caliber of education that you need, when they're not even familiar with really whether or not the caliber of what they need is at that local community college. Hold on. So because you don't have an Ivy Tech degree, you're not as competitive as a person from a university, which is a part of this immaturity in some of these people that are employed. So the other thing I wanted to address was the presence of Christians and testimonies as a commodity. This is between you and God. This is what you're doing, but you and this is what I found. A lot of the things that I've been dealing with over these years have been like prayer topics that I've been praying for years and years and years and years and years. But I was within my lab, I was within a very small group of people, and my prayers were within that group of people. And these were just rolling prayers that I just kept on praying until they came to pass. And so then come outside people trying to put in their 2 cents in these prayers that they probably aren't probably supposed to be involved in, but they want to because they use the word and they use the religious activity of the American Christian power, consortium, I guess, they use that in the capacity of a commodity. And so they want to know what's going on in your life. They want to know what kind of testimony you have because that's a commodity. Like, in jail they use cigarettes. In churches, your presence is determined by whether or not you have a testimony or whether or not you're making enough money or money. And also, they will threaten you to make you give them your testimony. And make you probably even sometimes prematurely testify to something that's not done. So right now my unemployment is because I think that I have these groups of churches that want me to come and testify about finishing school. But finishing school is not the end point. The end point was employment. And that was one of the things on my list when I wrote this this prayer out for the grad school program. So the church that I began with became so abusive I had to leave there. They were like, oh, come back to us. And I did come back to them, but they were so abusive they couldn't turn the abuse off. And so we had to get the police involved and stop them from being in contact with me. And these are narcissists. This is narcissistic behavior. People think that they own other people and they own other people's testimonies because of their presence or whatever. That's just not reality. And so, for example, I argued with my mom yesterday, or day before yesterday, and I would tell her that I've been praying for somebody, or praying about something, and she's like, "Well, you don't even go to church. What does that have to do with prayer? Prayer has nothing to do with church." I know that people that have been clergy that were in prison for years, and they took, and they were imprisoned by whatever organization or for whatever religious reason, and they took communion every day and survived unbelievable things, and they didn't go to church anymore. They were in the middle of the testimony. And so knowing that I'm dealing with a lot of just shady people, psychological issues, community behaviors, if I do go and work with the UN, I will have such a different understanding of what communities are. And, when I was growing up, a community was a beneficial thing. It was life-giving. There was security and protection in it. And now these communities are just like poison. And you're living in and within existences of people that are really poisonous. And you have to take in, you have to be careful about how much you take in. Or, even with my mom, she gives poison quite often, and you have to stop her. It's like she's got a venom in her, and it just envenomates you, or you have to shut her down before she can do that. And there's no brain cognition, absolutely none. She's got she's just blank behind what she says. So for you to say, didn't we just talk about that 5 minutes ago? Means nothing to her, because she doesn't think about 5 minutes ago. She thinks about, I don't know. And so I guess that's odd for me, because when I would go to the psychologist we would talk about situations so that the next time I encountered a person or encountered a specific kind of situation, I had options. And also, I've kind of figured out what your problem might be. So, like, if you're jealous of me, or if you have mood swings, or your life is just fucked up, then I can understand when we communicate. I'm gonna have to think differently about how to communicate with you. And interestingly enough, one of the girls that gave me the worst time, in the end, had come crying to me, needing me for something, and all of this meanness that she meant to give me, she had to rescind, and take it back and apologize. And she told why she was such a bitch to me, and why she was so mean, and why she would just have Tourette's syndrome verbal abuse that she would give towards me. And that's another thing I wanted to just make a video about, which was very interesting. The other company that I worked for, I feel like I kind of there were things that were happening that I could have stayed there longer. They didn't make the effort. And so I moved on, and then I go back, and I found out that one of the Christian groups that I was a part of, now at that job even, there was a Bible study group that would go, and they would play cards on one night a week or something. So we go to this other group, and they played cards, and it was like, we used it for an opportunity to eat food. So you bring, it was like a potluck, so you bring food and play cards. And it was good because it was just like, take your mind off of work. And so that was one gentleman. There was another guy that was like a Christian. Once my dad passed, I would go to him and kind of ask advice about things that I was doing. My neurologist, Dr. Hoyer, was a wonderful fill-in for the financial aspects of my life. I had lots of financial problems. Not really. I just couldn't figure out how to get out of the debt that I was in and help my family with my dad dying. And so I got a cheaper apartment, and that meant I had to have roommates. But it was so much cheaper than I could send my mom money. So I would send my mom money, and this is $250. This is a lot of money I would send to help with bills and stuff as we got our lives back together and finished off the bills and things with my dad. And so I had gentlemen that were helpful in telling me how to invest. And honey, I went from checking to cash to debt free. And I went from a lot of debt, using a debt management company. Within 2 years, I was done with the largest portion of my debt because of that management of my money and learning how to distribute my money, to use my money, to budget my money. And so I was grateful for that. But if these networks around here, if they hear anything like that, then the only thing it does is destroy. So you have to teach it. So my mom now has been on a spending spree. We just spend quite a bit. I don't know. And I don't know if I'm supposed to ask her what I need, or if I should not, or does she expect me to ask her what I need because I have things that I need. I finally got a coat. Get this, $120 coat, $25. I was just floored. So I think that's a huge blessing. A $15 purse, I think, was $11. So I got a cute purse and a cute coat for really, really, really cheap. But I had been working with that volunteering, thing. But it's illegal. We're not registered to be working with them, and so they're paying us. And so, I'm and I know South Bend is a dirty city. There's so many dirty things that happen there. There's drugs. There's a lot of people getting murdered, and watching my brother's life. It's just being drug in by an octopus into a pit of hell. Literally, that's what South Bend is like. And so anything in South Bend, including with church people apparently, will be a lot of the stuff is not right, or for me being here, because I won't have a baby. And this is a gutter, white trash community, white trash South Bend as well. There is just a lot of white trash here. They don't think normally about development. They don't think normally about employment. They're like just, wow, they've made this alternate reality of existence, and within their color, within their realm, they provide for one another, whether they deserve it or not. But for the other people that are qualified, that could probably help in any capacity, they don't have room for it, because if they get smart people, then they'll ask questions that they can't answer. Just like when I went to the refugee coordinator for the state, he didn't even know his role was supposed to be, he was the human trafficking coordinator. So he was supposed to be helping trafficking victims in the state of Indiana, and he was not aware of it. And so, like, I'm like, dude, you're listed federally as being federally listed as the person that's supposed to help with trafficking, and you don't know it. And so he referred me to a prosecuting attorney who I read his, he talked about his income range when he was growing up being poverty. If you encounter people that have had an impoverished background, treat them like they're poison. They are psychologically not going to be able to connect with you. They don't solve problems normally. They can't help you solve problems. They can't think to solve problems in an abnormal way. So like they can't think outside of the box. They don't have the cognition to solve problems. So they usually can't help you with anything. Like I've called around the city of South Bend looking for a lawyer, and I had a whole bunch of lawyers. They couldn't even refer me to the other kind of lawyer, or a way to refer me to another kind of lawyer for employment law. They didn't have anybody they knew from school, and so like you'll notice if you're in low-income communities, there'll be no answers, and nobody knows how to move anything forward. So it'll be like stagnant. You'll feel like if you're in dead water, because they don't have a lot of brain activity, which is unfortunate, but it's very, very true. And so if you find yourself in that kind of community, you're going to have to reach into like where you know there are people that have brain activity. You might want to go back to your college and ask for help. When I was at Purdue's campus, I realized that I was under a lot of white trash men. People that had impoverished backgrounds and were lower income white males. And once I got them out of my system and I stopped asking questions, I got answers. And so like women and other countries had the answers that these white males like piddled wrong with for like 8 months. And I got my job like quickly because like the women on campus found me the job. The men on campus with their sex, exploitation of women, like they would say they don't know the answer. And you're just dealing with, also just be aware, you got a lot of sexual offenders around you no matter where you are. And you got construction workers and things like that. They move girls, semi-drivers, they move women around in uncanny ways in groups, and they know it. And it's across colors, it's not just white. It can be white and black. And so do not trust, first of all, unfortunately, most men of lower income backgrounds. If they look like they're a little tore up, unfortunately, even the ones that are like white collar but they come from an impoverished background, if you ask them questions, they won't be able to answer them. You'll know. They don't have a lot of depth in their understanding. They don't have a lot of depth in what they know how to do. And so you'll be able to really easily decipher them by just asking a few questions. Like I had a gentleman at the hospital, sent him an email, and his response was kind of odd, and so I responded more thoroughly, and then he still gave me a blank, like he didn't understand what I said. And so I itemized all of the questions that I had, and then I gave him options to answer A, B, C. You can say A, B, or C, and then can you answer me? And because it took that much, then I knew that was probably a hospital system that had a lot of that, because most adults can answer and respond to an email. Well, me and my pathologist was very intelligent. He was a white male, but I think he was probably from a middle income background. He never gave me a blank. He never misunderstood me or didn't understand what I said when we talked. If anything, he'd ask, well, what's going on? Why aren't we done with this problem? Why aren't we finished with this? What's going on? Why aren't we moving this forward? Where's the rest of that study? And so actually, he gave me the seed of the idea for the patent. Because he's a professor, so it was a PhD began. So he was a veterinary PhD. Phenomenal man, but he breaks the dick off of all of these dumb motherfuckers that I deal with, okay? All of your dicks are broken because that man was so fucking smart that let me know that your brain activity is either shit or you have brain activity. And if it's shit, you won't have answers. And there's no excuse for it. You're either shit or you have brain activity. And there's no in between. And you know, you can go high up in a company. I had presidents with my company that were not shit brains. They were smart men. They could give you answers. They were gonna check you just the right way. This stupid shit, like when I dealt with the state refugee coordinator and he gave me this piss ass answer. You're representing the state in this capacity. You gave me this piss ass answer for what the fuck you didn't do for women. Or anybody that was being trafficked in the whole state and you don't even know it, but you're listed online. You know, that's not my problem, that's your problem. And so I told the Attorney General about that. But you've got a lot of shit brains people around you. So part of your employment is not necessarily that you are unemployable. You probably got a lot of shit brain people around you. So you have to find answers. And there are answers, and there are people that do not have shit for brains that can place you properly. When I was on Purdue's campus, I found one of my former career counselors, and she knew exactly what I was talking about in my resume. We fixed the resume so it was properly presented. And all of these stupid problems that I had been dealing with in South Bend and this Mishawaka area was nothing. And even now, like I also say, you know, I used to go to Whole Foods to get my food. And honey, I generated my ideas for my small business to just like fill in the blanks for employment. And honey, you would have thought that, oh my God, you would have thought that I had murdered somebody. Those white people like swarmed me as I built that little business thing. And the idea was just to fill in so that while I was having my unemployment money come in, I would have something else. And it wasn't like a big business. It was just like a small thing that I could do with an intimate number of people. What you have in these white trash communities is literally they're autistic. And if they're not born autistic, they'll make themselves autistic by their lack of communication. So a lot of them don't have normal communication skills. You'll get like a lot of men that just don't talk a lot. You know, you gotta practice. You know, you can't just say, I just don't talk a lot. You need to practice that. Or you're a dog. Dogs don't practice anything. Humans do something, you know. Anyway, and if they're not, just stay away from them. That's a volatile personality of your own. Antisocial behaviors related with sociopaths. Sociopaths destroy things, people, careers, other people. The next level after the sociopath is psychopath. And then after the psychopath, you go into the narcissists and the serial killers. So you're going along a line of communication and antisocial disorder, antisocial behavior that is unhealthy, that leads to death of people, and serial killers behave in those manners. Don't think that it's okay to be antisocial. It's not okay to be isolated and antisocial. All you have is a bunch of psychopathic men around you, and most of them probably masturbate excessively, and so they don't mind being quiet because they're just masturbating all day. They might be masturbating at work all day long. Do you know who else does that? Psych ward members. People on psych wards, they used to have to like hold them down to keep them from masturbating all day long. So what do you know? You're dealing with people with psychological dysfunction. Do you follow them? No. And they don't get better. They usually won't go see a psychologist to balance that. And what they do is they're like a poison, like we said, like I said earlier, you know, you keep taking the poison, it'll kill you. Or, you know, that poison can permeate the atmosphere, like just like when I was with the cult people, they kind of deadened everything. And I was wondering why people were so intrigued by my excitement for life and my excitement for existence. The cult leader is a narcissist. Narcissists don't like anything above them, around them, to have any more life than them, so they'll shoot and kill just about anything around them that has any life whatsoever. And so what you get are populations around them that are muted, because it's like just like having an abusive dad. You know, you get quiet, you don't know what to do, you don't know what you're allowed to do, you don't know if you're going to attack with one another if you do something, if you say something. So what you need to do in that case is learn power structures. When I was with the cults and the psychopathic ass Jeff Johns with his psychopathic fucking serial killer ass, praise the Lord, you prophet fucker, but he's not really a prophet. Okay, really he's not. And I'll tell you why later. But anyway, I had to learn power structures, and I didn't know what I was in. But what these males will do, these white males especially will do, is they won't tell you the power structure. They know it, but they won't tell it to you so that you can gain freedom for them. If you are of a higher class than white trash, they are like built to shut down once your authority takes over them. So like there'll be like a word that you can say and it will like stop them from like bothering you. Literally, they're like programmed robots. Unfortunately, because of the lack of cognition, the lack of the breadth and depth of their psychological, like the expanse of where their psychology has taken them, they don't know how to respond outside of, you know, like a switch. You know, they think kind of like switches. And so if you're binary, you either can let the 0 or 1 appear, or you can stop the 0 or 1 from appearing. And so you have to learn how to stop their 0 and 1 binary code from appearing. Around here, these psychopath people do a lot with words. And so, like, me and my mom were at Value City Furniture for like 3 or 4 hours buying furniture, and they were trying to, you know, commit her to buying like $2,000 worth of furniture, adding almost like $300 a month, like $250 a month of the bill, and my mom's like mind was like not there. Whatever they've done to her during those many hours walking her around the store, she was like gone. And so you would talk to her and she was like not there. But she was going to make the decision about whether or not she's going to buy this furniture. So I'm telling her, well, if you can't understand what I'm saying to you, let's go and, you know, go get something to eat so that you can have like brain activity to make this decision. And she just sat there. And I was like, are you going to like just sit here for like another hour? Are you making a decision? Or are you feeling pressured? Like, what's exactly going on? So if you are an outsider watching this, and these people are all around the city, they do just the oddest thing. They've matured into this cacophony of god-awful behavior. You can't even like communicate normally. Like you can't chit chat. Like for example, my mom, like now with her, like I'll have an idea about something, I'll say, what about this? And instead of her saying yes or no, she thinks that if I offer something to her that is just like it's like an infraction of some kind. And I'm like, well, whose reality are you not allowed to have choices? With the kids that I used to work with, we had to teach some of them, you have choices. You don't have to beat people in the head when you're angry. You can say, you know, I'm going to go take a time out over here, and instead of getting in trouble and getting myself incarcerated or in jail or prison or possibly killing somebody, let me sit my little crazy ass down for a few hours, and then I won't kill anybody. Choices. Or if I can't, you know, figure out how to tell how I feel, I can look at a picture of happy faces that have different kinds of emotions, and I can point to the one that I feel, and then I can communicate to you how I feel, as opposed to me yelling at you for 4 hours, or as opposed to me abusing you or trying to belittle you because I'm just upset and I'm such a competitive person that I can't admit I just can't express myself properly. These are the therapeutic things that I've learned. Honey, you would think that I was trying to inject people with poison with the behaviors that I get from just trying to do normal contact. So, as knowing that, it makes it very difficult to be like anything. And then, because they've been so abused, they set up a system around you where they think, like, this guy told me, he was like, well, you get employed by the kind of car that you have. I was like, what are you talking about? I worked at that job where I made $40,000 a year, and the people that were making like $70,000 had an older car than I did. That's not a part of it. You know, those people had an older car, they had homes and nice things that they paid for. They made choices not to buy new cars and to keep that money for other things. So I was like, that's not true. Who told you that? And well, I guess the people that were around him told him that was the truth, but that's not true. You don't have to buy a new car to get a job. You don't have to have a nice car to get a job. You just have to have transportation to get a job. But when you have these demented and really immature communities of people, they get these visions of grandeur for the reality of something they've never experienced before. And so, you know, they think a corporate job is this, this, and this. And, you know, some of the aspects of that might be true, but reality is corporate jobs are filled by humans. And they can be just as messy for them as they are for others. And not everybody comes to work dressed in a suit perfectly every single day. And that's, you know, the reality of life and not the fake reality of what we see on TV. So anyway, coming from that, this is where I am. Unfortunately, I'll be going with a staffing company, but I'm within a city that doesn't read resumes. So just knowing that email that I sent with that man, and I was like, oh, how do I have FDA level research for an inventory job? Like, you have no levity in your decision for someone else filling that position, even if overqualified, which shows that there's a really great immaturity. And the problem with that is those companies end up dying out, whether you want to admit it or not. The companies that we were a part of that were not able to keep up with us closed. And then my president with my company grew companies because he knew how to keep generating momentum. Companies only have so much money, period. Everybody has only so much money, and you can get a few $1 million a few times, but eventually if you're not producing anything, you're not going to get anything, and nobody's going to do business with you anymore. One of the labs that we dealt with, they kept giving us shoddy results on our samples, so we send them these small studies, and they send samples that were just grody. I mean, they had dead blood in them, and they hadn't been like preserved quickly enough, so the blood had blackened, and you know, we couldn't tell if it was a blood clot or had it been added afterwards. And you know, when we would do things in the lab, things were very clean, very pristine, and you could tell if there had been any damage, so that everything had a record, everything had a history, everything had a chain of custody form. You knew where it came from, where it had been, what had been done to it. All of those things were a normal part of our job expectation. And so there was a high level of detail, whatever. We dealt with this company, and then eventually they became a joke because you couldn't give them anything without it coming back like, and you were like, oh my God, like, do you need to learn how to, do we need to come and teach you how to do this professionally? Because you're giving us grody like samples, and you know, the things that your responses are just letting us know that we're not on the same page as far as what we're expecting. And you know, some people, for example, would think that prototyping is just, you know, that you don't do a very good job of prototyping. You just like one and done. It's not. Prototyping is expensive, and prototyping is an expensive process, and the research involved with it is expensive. And so you don't take those samples and just toss them in formalin. You take as good of data as you can, and you do the formalin, perfusion as quickly as you can, just like it were another study, just as though it was like a real study, like, because you're gonna need that data later, whether you want to admit it or not. And we've had that where we had to go to, previous samples to figure out what the model was looking at before the clinical process or whatever. And so records are important. History is important. What you do and how you treat things is very important. And how you are treated as you are employed is very important. If you're in a community that degrades people, if you see a lot of people going into jail, sit down and learn how to, first of all, manage your family. There are a lot of purging behaviors of parents around here, and there are a lot of jail behaviors of the community. It's like there's like a toilet where the flush is, parents, and they flush them into this jail system, and the city just has to it has a really weird predilection to incarceration, and I'm not really sure why, and I want to let you know that destroys, it's not good to have anything on your any part of your work history or anything like that. You don't want to have any of those things. And so what I feel I see people what happens to people is the city itself doesn't employ them because it doesn't see them, and then they're pushed to do things that are illegal to get their needs met, and then those illegal things are like resulting in them having further deterioration of their legality. Thankfully, before I started writing about what I thought was black people's genocide in America, I wrote to my law school, and I had been in contact with them for a few years, to tell them I'm about to write about genocide at a white university that I've had problems at before, just going to the library. So if anything happens to me, this is where I am, this is what I was doing. And so while I was on campus, I got to see the problem that I was having with writing about the genocide was I was dealing with white trash, which I didn't know existed. But to write the university and let them know, oh gosh, this is endangering my life. Like literally they were getting upset with me because I was exposing how the systems were kind of funneling people into bad situations on campus. And the white people were funneling bad situations towards, minority groups. It wasn't just black people. The Asian groups were having problems, and the white people were really bad about like unnesting these kids. Even college is a kind of a time when you're nesting, where you have to build, and you have to build as a group, and you have to protect one another. And these white males would go in and just kind of bulldoze a lot. But they're employed, and their histories are like incest in their family, and Nazis, in their last generation, and their great grandfather was a Nazi, and you're like, oh my God! And this is what the university was employing. So whoever was employing them, they were a great nest of horribleness, and so it was dangerous to be around them. All that to say, there was still an answer for a job. Stupid couldn't keep me from being employed, even though stupid was taunting and possibly dangerous. Stupid couldn't stop a job because they don't control everything. White people, they don't control everything, because there are white people that help control things that are outside of the normal control that can still get your needs met. And so just like my president, he was about business. And he was about whatever nationality he needed to bring in to do business and make money. That's why he has made like 4 or 5 companies right now, okay? And so that just proves a lot of the stupid shit that you deal with, there are answers to. If it means that you don't deal with any employment companies and they're all full of shit in the whole city, then call the companies themselves make a relationship with the HR director or recruiter there, and I've dealt with companies that tried to blackball me because I was trying to volunteer and they were being rude. And I said, well, how can you be rude to a volunteer? Well, you need volunteers and you're being rude. So I told that woman's director and she got in trouble. So then she she got in trouble for being rude. But I'm like, well, you have working people that are coming to volunteer for you, and how dare you be rude when you need volunteering? Do you understand? We're dealing with like mental dysfunction. It's like, oh my God. Anyway, so I'm gonna write the law program again to let them know I'm at this next part, which is apparently employment is dangerous. Apparently, and I don't know if this is trafficking by definition. I know that I have been told by the police, this is where you're going to stay. We're not going to have them make you move and move and move. And they know how this community is, and my uncles know how this community can move girls around, and so we're not going to have that. But oh my God, my life is like unbelievable in the uniqueness of what I've been dealing with. And just a lot of stupid time-wasting shit. That's just so sad. But I'll say this. Even in Hidden Figures, who beat us to the moon because we were being assholes? Somebody's always working while you're being an asshole. Beating your ass.